From the moment I met Jake, I knew our lives would be a roller coaster. I was always the type to plan everything out. By the time I turned 28, I had a stable job as a lawyer, a nice apartment, and a clear idea of where I wanted my life to go. Financial stability was important to me, and I prided myself on my ability to manage my finances. Jake, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. The first time we met, he had this infectious energy about him that drew me in. He was a tall man with messy brown hair and a carefree smile that could melt anyone's heart. We met at a mutual friend's party. I was discussing a recent case I had won at work, and Jake walked over, drink in hand. "So, you're the famous lawyer Rachel everyone's talking about," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" "The guy who's about to change your life." He winked. Laughing, I replied, "That's a bold statement, but sure, I'll bite. Tell me, how do you plan on doing that?" Over the next few hours, we talked about everything, from our childhood memories to our future dreams. He told me about his love for adventure and how he often went on spontaneous trips just because he felt like it. He said he believed in living in the moment and enjoying every second of life. I found his perspective refreshing. Here I was, someone who always planned ahead, and then there was Jake, someone who took each day as it came. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. He introduced me to a world of spontaneity, and I brought a bit of order to his chaos. Our dates were always full of surprises. One day, he would take me out for a fancy dinner, and the next, we would be on a random road trip to nowhere. It wasn't just the fun times that made me fall for him. It was also the way he cared for me. He would always make sure I was okay, and he had this unique ability to make me feel special. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find my apartment filled with candles and roses. Jake stood in the middle of the room, a huge grin on his face. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up," he said. I smiled. "You always know how to make a bad day better." We settled into a routine, and before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together and even getting married. Our relationship had its challenges, especially when it came to our different views on money. I was always careful with my spending, while Jake was more impulsive. "Come on, let's just book that trip to Europe," he would often say. I would reply, "We need to plan it out, Jake. We can't just spend without thinking." He would just roll his eyes. "You worry too much." Despite our differences, we loved each other deeply. So, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I believed that love could overcome any obstacle, and I was ready to start a new chapter of my life with Jake. Meeting the in-laws is always a nerve-wracking experience, but when Jake asked me to join a family dinner, I wasn't just nervous, I was curious. I had already heard snippets about Jake's family and their money habits, and I was eager to get the full picture. Their house was a large, sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. As we drove up the long driveway, I noticed the numerous cars parked outside, many of which looked brand new. As we entered, I was greeted with a loud cheer from Jake's relatives. They were a lively bunch, and the house was filled with laughter and chatter. Jake's mother, Linda, was a petite woman with a warm smile. She hugged me tightly and said, "It's so good to finally meet you." I smiled back. "Thank you for having me." Jake's father, Mark, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a booming voice. "So, you're the lawyer who's captured our Jake's heart," he chuckled, shaking my hand firmly. "It seems that way," I laughed. Dinner was a grand affair. The table was laden with dishes, and wine glasses clinked cheerfully. As we ate, I observed the dynamics of Jake's family. They talked about their recent purchases and the vacations they had been on, or were planning to go on. Money seemed to flow freely in their conversations, and I got the sense that they didn't think twice before spending. Linda mentioned a recent shopping spree in Paris. Mark spoke of a new business venture that required a significant investment. Their younger daughter, Sarah, excitedly chatted about her plans to study abroad. At one point, Jake's older sister, Emily, turned to me. "So, how do you manage your finances? Being a lawyer, you must be earning a lot." I hesitated for a moment before answering. "I try to save and invest wisely. It's important to have a financial safety net." Jake jumped in. "She's the practical one in our relationship." Emily laughed. "Sounds like you two balance each other out." The evening went on, and I could feel the difference in our lifestyles. While I was always cautious about spending, Jake's family seemed to have a live for today mentality. It was clear that they enjoyed the finer things in life and didn't hesitate to indulge. As the night drew to a close, Linda pulled me aside. "You know, dear," she began, "Jake is lucky to have you, but do let him have his fun. Money is meant to be enjoyed." I nodded politely. "Of course. I just believe in being careful." She patted my hand. "Balance is key." As Jake and I drove back home, the weight of our differences hung in the air. I turned to him. "Your family is lovely, but we have very different views on money." Jake sighed. "I know, but love is about compromise, right?" I smiled. "Yes, but compromise doesn't mean losing oneself." Jake reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out." But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling that our financial differences, combined with the influence of Jake's family, would soon lead to challenges that neither of us were prepared for. And so it happened. We were barely through the front door when the tension in Jake's family home became apparent. The large living room, which I remembered as a place of laughter and chatter during our last visit, was now filled with anxious faces. Everyone was there. Jake's parents, his siblings, and most notably, his younger brother Ryan. I had always found Ryan a bit unpredictable. He was the sort of person who took chances, always believing the next big break was just around the corner. That day, he looked restless, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding direct contact. Without much preamble, Linda, Jake's mother, began, "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a serious situation on our hands." Ryan, with a sigh, came forward. "I messed up. I owe the bank $100,000. They're saying they'll take legal action if I don't pay soon." The room erupted in a flurry of questions and exclaims. Jake's hand tightened around mine. He looked more shocked than anyone. Mark, Jake's father, rubbed his temples. "Ryan, we always warned you about getting involved in those sketchy deals." Ryan snapped back. "I thought they were good investments." Seeing where the discussion might be heading, Linda tried to refocus the group. "The blame game won't help. We need to find a solution." Emily, Jake's sister, interjected, "Why don't we all chip in? If we pool our resources, we might cover most of it." Mark sighed. "Most of our money is tied up. We can't pull out that kind of cash right now." Then, all eyes turned to me. I felt trapped, like a deer in headlights. I sensed what was coming next. Jake, squeezing my hand tighter, spoke up. "You've got savings, right? We can use that to help Ryan out." I looked at him in disbelief. Was he seriously suggesting this? Linda's eyes brightened. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Can you help, dear?" I tried to remain calm. "Jake, we've talked about being careful with our finances. My savings are for our future." Jake's face reddened. "This is family. Don't you care about my brother?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, aren't we supposed to be family now? Or does money matter more to you?" Feeling cornered, I replied, "I understand this is a tough situation, but why should I hand over my hard-earned savings when there might be other solutions? Maybe I can help negotiate with the bank? Work out a plan?" Jake's voice grew louder. "This isn't the time for legal advice. Ryan needs help now." Linda chimed in, with an edge to her voice. "We thought family meant something to you. Guess we were wrong." The room felt stifling, the weight of their expectations and accusations pressing down on me. I had hoped Jake would be my ally, but he seemed to have chosen his family's side. The meeting ended with no resolution. As Jake and I walked back to the car, I felt a chasm growing between us. The dawning light had always been a comforting sight, but this morning its warmth was overshadowed by a chilling discovery. Glancing at my phone, I saw an alarming bank notification. My heart thudded heavily as I saw the staggering amount. $150,000 had been transferred out of my savings, and even more shockingly, it had been sent to Jake's account. Confusion and dread wrapped around me. This couldn't be right. Without hesitation, I tried calling Jake, but he didn't answer. I sent a message. "Jake, why is there $150,000 transferred to your account? We need to talk. Now." Time ticked by, and every silent moment only amplified my anxiety. He didn't respond. The swirling unease forced me into action, and I decided to confront him at his workplace. As I approached his office, I saw his empty desk. One of his colleagues, Sarah, looked up and said, "Looking for Jake? He's taken the day off. Some personal matters," he mentioned. I muttered a thanks, my thoughts racing even faster now. With growing dread, I decided to go to his parents' place. Perhaps they knew something, or perhaps they could get Jake to talk to me. The large wooden door of their house looked more imposing than ever. I knocked assertively. After a brief moment, Linda, Jake's mother, opened the door just a crack. Her guarded expression told me she was aware of something. "I need to speak to Jake," I demanded. Linda glanced behind her, hesitating. "Jake isn't here," she replied. "Where is he? He's taken a huge amount from our joint savings. I need answers." Her face remained passive. "I don't know about any money," she claimed, but her eyes darted away. "Let me in. We need to discuss this," I insisted. But instead of yielding, she firmly stated, "I think it's best if you leave," and shut the door in my face. The blatant act left me stunned. Standing there, I realized the gravity of the betrayal. They knew, and they were covering for him. The reception area of the police station was bustling. Uniformed officers moved to and fro, the hum of conversation punctuated by the ring of phones. I approached the front desk, where an officer sat, looking engrossed in paperwork. "Excuse me," I began, my voice slightly shaky. "I need to report a significant unauthorized transaction from my bank account. It's my husband." The officer, whose name tag read Perez, looked up, her eyes filled with understanding. "Take a seat." She gestured to the chairs nearby. "I'll call someone to assist you." Sitting down, my thoughts swirled. Was I really about to report my own husband? Before I could contemplate further, a tall officer approached me. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Officer Daniels. Officer Perez informed me about your situation. Let's go to my office where we can talk." We walked down a corridor, and he gestured to a chair opposite his desk. As I explained the situation to him, I noticed his brows furrow in concern. "So, you believe your husband took this money without your consent?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, and his family seems to be in on it. They shut me out when I went to confront them." Officer Daniels jotted down notes. "Do you have any evidence of this transaction?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank notification and the message I had sent Jake, as well as his vague reply. Officer Daniels looked at the screen, his expression serious. "This certainly helps, but it's going to be a complicated case, given that he's your husband. Do you wish to press charges?" Taking a deep breath, I responded, "Yes, I do. I feel betrayed and violated. I need to stand up for myself." He nodded. "I understand. We'll start the process. It may take time, but we'll support you every step of the way." "Thank you," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. Officer Daniels extended a comforting hand. "It's tough, I know, but you're doing the right thing. We'll get to the bottom of this." The courtroom was a daunting place, its high ceilings echoing the whispers of the people inside. Rows of wooden benches filled with friends, family, reporters, and strangers who had taken an interest in the case. The tension was palpable. I sat on one side, dressed conservatively, my best friend Sarah by my side for support. Across the room, Jake sat with his parents. He avoided making eye contact with me. The judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair tied back neatly, cleared her throat, signaling the start of the proceedings. "Order in the court," she declared. The prosecution began by detailing the charges against Jake: the unauthorized transaction, the evasion when confronted, and the role of Jake's family in possibly abetting the crime. It was painful to relive the betrayal as the evidence was presented. Bank statements, my call records, and the security footage from Jake's parents' home on the day I confronted them. Then it was Jake's turn to testify. He stood, looking much smaller than I remembered. "Your Honor, I admit to transferring the money, but I did it out of desperation. My family was drowning in debt. I thought if I took the money, it would fix everything. I planned to return it." I clenched my fists. He was playing the victim card. The prosecutor spoke up. "Mr. Collins, did you discuss this with your wife before taking such a drastic step?" Jake hesitated. "No, I thought she wouldn't understand." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So, you decided stealing was the better option?" Jake lowered his gaze. "I made a mistake." The trial went on for hours. Witnesses were called, statements were read. When the time came for me to testify, I felt a lump in my throat. With every ounce of strength, I recounted the events, the betrayal, the pain of being shut out by someone I had once loved. Sarah was called up next. She spoke of my character, my hard work, my dedication to building a life with Jake, and the anguish I had experienced when discovering the betrayal. When the closing statements were made, the room held its collective breath. The judge, after taking her time, declared, "Mr. Collins, you've admitted to your crime, and while I understand your intent was not malicious, the act was a clear violation of trust. You will return the full amount of $150,000 to Mrs. Collins immediately and pay an additional fine for this unauthorized transaction." Jake's face went pale. His parents seemed equally shocked. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I advise both parties to consider mediation to resolve any personal disputes." As I left the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The man I had once dreamt of building a life with was now a stranger, a criminal in my eyes. After the court proceedings, my mind kept going back to one thing. How did Jake's family end up in such a mess in the first place? And why was I, a mere bystander in their family affairs, paying the price? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to find out the root cause. The first person I thought to reach out to was Amanda, Jake's ex-girlfriend from before we met. She had once mentioned how Jake's family had a penchant for shady dealings. Back then, I had dismissed her words as jealousy, but now I wondered if there was some truth to it. I dialed her number, half expecting her not to pick up, but she did. "Hello?" "Hey, Amanda, it's Rachel. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to talk." She paused, then replied, "About Jake?" "Yes." We met up at a quiet coffee shop the next day. Amanda looked different, more mature and composed than I remembered. After exchanging pleasantries, I got straight to the point. "Amanda, you once told me about Jake's family, about their dealings. I need to know more." She sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. "I wondered when you'd ask. Jake's family has been involved in some sketchy businesses for years. Loan sharking, shady investments, you name it. They've always been about quick money." I frowned, but Jake never seemed that way, at least not when we were dating. Amanda shook her head. He tried to distance himself from it, but family ties run deep, and when his brother got into that massive debt, he got sucked right back in. My heart sank. "So, all this time?" She nodded. "He's been trying to bail them out. I warned you, remember? I saw the signs, the desperation, the sneaky phone calls, but you were too in love to see." I stared down, fighting back tears. I can't believe I was so naive. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You're not the first, and won't be the last. They're masters of manipulation." The conversation shifted, and I learned that Jake's brother had a gambling problem. The debts weren't from a failed business or medical emergency. They were from nights spent at underground gambling dens and high-stakes poker games. I thanked Amanda for her honesty and clarity. As I walked back to my car, everything made sense. The secrecy, the desperation, the betrayal. Jake's family was drowning, and in their desperation, they tried to drag me down with them. After the dust settled, one thing was clear to me. I needed to put the past firmly behind me. The first step was finalizing the divorce from Jake. It was a relatively quick process, given the circumstances. My lawyer, an old friend from law school, ensured that it went smoothly without me having to face Jake again. One evening, after a long day at work, I met up with some college friends for dinner. Sarah, always the one with the latest gossip, leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You remember Jake's brother, right? Heard he's been locked up for fraud." I raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." She shook her head. Wish I was. Multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. They say he'd been scamming people for years. Anna chimed in. And that's not all. Jake's parents' property? Seized and auctioned off to clear their mounting debts. I took a deep breath, processing the information. It's just sad. That family had so many issues, so many problems. Sarah squeezed my hand. You dodged a bullet, girl, and look at you now, moving on, living your best life. I smiled, grateful for the support. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finding my way. Life continued. Days turned into weeks, and then months. The wounds of the past slowly began to heal, and I started building a life that was truly mine. One evening, as I was settling down with a book, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I answered cautiously. Hello? Hey, it's Jake, came the hesitant voice. A chill ran down my spine. What do you want? He cleared his throat. Look, I know I've done wrong. I'm in a tough spot right now, financially. I was wondering if... No. I cut him off sharply. But I just need a little help to... No, Jake. You and your family have taken enough from me. I owe you nothing. I replied, my voice cold and firm. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, defeated, all right. I ended the call, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that I had moved on, that I was no longer entangled in their web of deceit and drama. Over time, I immersed myself in work and spent quality time with friends and family who genuinely cared about me. I learned to value and trust myself more than ever, firmly believing that no matter what life threw my way, I would always come out stronger on the other side. Growing up, my life was what many would call a fairy tale. My name is Evelyn Harrison. I was born into the Harrison family, one of the most influential families in our city. Our name was always in the papers for one event or another, but behind closed doors, we were just a regular family. My father ran Harrison Industries, a massive conglomerate with its fingers in everything from tech to fashion. I spent my childhood in large mansions, attending posh schools, and going on extravagant vacations. But despite all that, I never felt truly connected to that lifestyle. I enjoyed simple things, like reading a good book or having heartfelt conversations with close friends. During one of our family events, I met Daniel. He was different from the people I was used to. He wasn't from a wealthy family. In fact, he was there catering for the event. His laughter was genuine, and he had this light in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in a long while. Hey, you're Evelyn, right? He asked, handing me a drink. I nodded. Yes, and you are? Daniel, he replied with a smile. I work with the catering team. This is a big gig for us. We started talking, and it felt like we had known each other for years. Our conversations were simple, genuine, and heartfelt. He introduced me to a world outside my privileged bubble. A few months into our relationship, I introduced him to my family. My father, always the businessman, asked, What do you do, son? I'm a caterer, sir, Daniel replied confidently. My mother, always the gracious host, said, It's good to meet you, Daniel. Evelyn has told us a lot about you. After some time, I met Daniel's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. They lived in a modest house surrounded by lovely neighbors. Mrs. Thompson hugged me the moment she saw me. Oh, Evelyn, we've heard so much about you. Welcome! Mr. Thompson added, Daniel never stops talking about you. It's good to finally meet the girl who stole our boy's heart. As our relationship grew, I would often use my father's money to treat Daniel and sometimes gift something to his parents. It felt good to share my blessings with someone I loved. The morning everything changed began like any other. I was sipping my morning coffee when my phone rang. Seeing my father's name flash on the screen, I answered cheerfully, Good morning, Dad. There was a pause on the other end before he replied, his voice heavy with concern. Evelyn, I need you to come to the office, now. The urgency in his tone caught me off guard. Is everything okay? Just come. I'll explain when you get here, he responded, ending the call. Confused and worried, I quickly dressed and headed to Harrison Industries. The office was buzzing with activity, but not the usual energetic kind. There were hushed conversations and many concerned faces. The receptionist, usually so chirpy, gave me a sympathetic smile as she directed me to my father's office. Upon entering, I found him sitting behind his massive desk, papers scattered everywhere. His face was pale, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked, my voice filled with worry. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to find the right words. "Harrison Industries. We're declaring bankruptcy." My heart felt like it dropped to the floor. "What do you mean? How did this happen?" "We've been facing losses for a while, Evelyn. I thought we could turn things around, but we're out of options. Our debts have caught up with us." I sank into a chair, trying to process the news. Our life, as we knew it, was changing. Returning home, I hesitated at the door, thinking of how to break the news to Daniel. When I walked in, he sensed something was wrong immediately. "Evelyn, what happened?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. I took a deep breath. "Harrison Industries is going bankrupt." Daniel looked stunned. "But how?" "We've been facing losses. I had no idea it was this bad," I admitted, tears forming in my eyes. He wrapped his arms around me, trying to comfort me. "We'll get through this, Evelyn, together." But things moved quickly after that. Our posh apartment, the one filled with memories of our love, was the first thing we had to let go of. My father's assets were frozen, and suddenly, the lavish lifestyle I had always known vanished. "We'll have to move in with my parents," Daniel said one evening as we sat among packed boxes. "At least until we figure things out." I nodded, swallowing my pride. "It's just for a short while," I told myself. But little did I know, the real trials of our relationship were just beginning. The safety net I had always relied on was gone, and now we had to navigate the world together without the cushion of wealth to soften the blows. Moving into the Thompsons' house was a stark contrast to what I was used to. Their home was warm and cozy, but much smaller than the sprawling spaces I had grown up in. But I reminded myself that it was only temporary. At first, everything seemed fine. Mrs. Thompson would cook delicious meals, and Mr. Thompson would often share stories from his youth. However, as days turned into weeks, I began to notice a change. Simple things, like the way Mrs. Thompson would watch me when I took an extra serving of dinner, or how Mr. Thompson would turn off lights in rooms, even if I was still using them. One morning, as I was setting the breakfast table, Mrs. Thompson commented, "You know, Evelyn, back in our days, we would only use one type of jam for breakfast, not 3. Helps save money." I looked at the 3 jars on the table, suddenly feeling embarrassed. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied softly. Daniel started to change too. He wasn't the easygoing, jovial person I fell in love with anymore. He would snap at small things and often come home from work visibly stressed. One evening, I tried to talk to him. "Daniel, is everything okay at work?" I asked, noticing how tired he looked. He sighed heavily. "It's just stressful, okay? We need money, and I'm trying to do everything I can." I reached out, trying to comfort him. "We're in this together. Maybe I can look for a job too?" He pulled away. "Maybe you should. It's high time." It stung. I wasn't used to this version of Daniel, but I swallowed my feelings, thinking he was just stressed. One Saturday, as I was cleaning our room, I overheard a conversation between Daniel and his parents. "She doesn't understand the value of money, Ma. She's lived a silver spoon life." Mrs. Thompson replied, "I've noticed. She needs to adapt, Daniel. We can't keep supporting her lavish tastes." Mr. Thompson added, "She needs a reality check." I felt like I had been slapped. They thought I was being a burden. Tears filled my eyes, but I kept quiet. The once warm house started feeling cold and unwelcoming. Every action of mine was scrutinized, every decision questioned. The people who had once been so accepting were now judgmental. Despite the increasing tension, I tried my best to fit in. I took up a job, started contributing to the household expenses, and even cut down on personal expenses. But no matter what I did, it never seemed enough. Evenings that were once filled with laughter and stories now became silent. The television would play in the background, but the atmosphere was always tense. Simple joys, like celebrating birthdays or anniversaries, became a thing of the past. It was clear that the financial strain was affecting not just our lifestyle, but our relationships too. I often found myself reminiscing about the old times, wishing things could go back to the way they were. But as each day passed, the divide only grew wider, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that the worst was yet to come. It was a few months into our stay at the Thompsons' home when Mr. Thompson's birthday approached. In previous years, this day had been marked by a simple family dinner at home. However, this year, they decided to celebrate at a nearby restaurant, inviting me to join them. I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. It was a chance for us to bond as a family again, away from the confines of the house. Maybe things could start to improve. Maybe this dinner could be a turning point. On the evening of the celebration, I made sure to dress modestly, not wanting to give any room for negative comments. As we entered the restaurant, I took in the familiar ambience of a place I had visited many times before. Back then, under different circumstances. The waiter led us to a reserved table. I noticed the patrons, some glancing at us, recognizing me from the old days. The thought made me slightly uncomfortable, but I pushed it aside. We settled in, and menus were handed out. I glanced through, noting the prices. Back when my family was affluent, such numbers would have been insignificant. But now, every dollar counted. Wanting to be considerate, I decided on a relatively inexpensive dish. Daniel spoke up. "I'll have the steak, medium rare." It was one of the pricier items on the menu. His mother chose the lobster, while Mr. Thompson opted for a full 3-course meal. I felt a bit surprised, but said nothing, waiting for my turn to order. As I was about to speak, Mrs. Thompson interrupted. "She'll have the garden salad and tap water." I was taken aback. "Actually, I was thinking of the chicken." Mrs. Thompson's voice had a sharp edge. "The salad is plenty. We need to be mindful of our expenses." I felt humiliated. My cheeks turned hot, and I could feel the eyes of nearby tables on us. Daniel chimed in, chuckling. "Yeah, Evelyn, can't always get the fancy stuff anymore." My heart sank. This was the man I loved? The man who once promised to stand by me through thick and thin? Before I could muster a response, Mr. Thompson added, "You should be grateful. Some people don't even get bread." Their laughter echoed in my ears, and a heavy lump formed in my throat. I felt like a spectacle, humiliated in front of an audience. With all eyes on me, I finally found my voice. "When my family was doing well, I shared everything I had with all of you. And now, when times are tough, this is how I'm treated?" Mrs. Thompson scoffed. "It's about time you learned the value of money." Daniel looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Mustering all the strength I had, I said, "I may not have the money I once did, but I still have my dignity." I stood up, leaving the table, the restaurant, and the whispers behind. The dinner, which I had hoped would be a turning point, had turned into a disaster. But it was also an awakening. I realized that while money could be lost and regained, some relationships were damaged beyond repair. And as I walked out into the cool night, I felt more determined than ever to find my way out of this mess. Morning rays streaked through the room, and with a heavy heart, I made my way downstairs. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee was a stark contrast to the cold atmosphere that greeted me. There, sitting around the breakfast table, were Daniel, his father, and his mother. The previous night's events still fresh in their minds and mine, the silence was palpable. Eager to break the tension, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "I understand last night was uncomfortable for everyone. Can we discuss it?" Daniel's mother scoffed. "Uncomfortable? That's one way to put it. It was downright embarrassing, Evelyn." His father chimed in. "What were you thinking? Making a scene in a public place? And over something as petty as a dish?" Daniel looked at me, his eyes void of the warmth they once held. "You could have taken it up with us privately." I was hurt, I defended myself, trying to keep my emotions in check. "When I saw that you all intentionally ordered the cheapest dish for me, it felt like a slap in the face." "It's just food, Evelyn," Daniel said dismissively. "No, it's not just about the food," I countered, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "It's about respect, understanding, and love." I turned to Daniel, searching for any trace of the man I fell in love with. "Do you even love me, Daniel? Or was it always about the money?" He hesitated for a moment, then with a smirk replied, "Money is a significant addition to love, isn't it?" I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. The weight of his words, filled with cynicism and devoid of any emotion, hit me harder than anything before. And to add salt to the wound, his mother added, "You were never a good fit for our family, always spending without thinking. Now you're just a freeloader." The hurt was too much to bear. The walls of the house, which once felt welcoming, now seemed to close in on me. Without another word, I turned away, my heart heavy, realizing that the love I thought was unbreakable was built on a foundation of convenience and materialism. Tears blurred my vision as I drove the familiar route to my parents' home. Every turn, every tree, brought back memories of a life that now felt worlds away. I wasn't sure how my parents would react, but I needed the comfort of home. The driveway looked the same, lined with the roses my mother loved so dearly. As I stepped out of the car, the front door opened, revealing my mother's worried face. "Evelyn!" She rushed towards me, pulling me into a tight embrace. Her warmth was an immediate solace, and I allowed myself a moment to just be held. Pulling back, she cupped my face, her eyes scanning for answers. "What happened, my love?" I swallowed hard, recounting the events of the past few months, ending with the disastrous dinner. She listened intently, her face a mixture of concern and anger. "Oh, Evelyn," she sighed, "you deserve so much better. I thought they loved me. I thought Daniel loved me." She brushed a strand of hair from my face. Sometimes, adversity reveals people's true colors. We were interrupted by the sound of my father's footsteps. He had a newspaper in hand, an amused expression on his face. "Is that my daughter I hear?" he said, feigning surprise. "Dad," I chuckled through my tears. He enveloped me in a hug, then held the newspaper out to me. The headline read, "Jackson Enterprises, from the brink to booming." "We're back on track," he said with a smile. I looked at him, shocked. "But how?" He chuckled. "Turns out the financial crisis wasn't as severe as we thought. With some smart moves and a bit of luck, we've not only recovered, but are thriving." I blinked back fresh tears, this time of relief. "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged. "I didn't want you to worry. Besides, I wanted to see who truly cared for my daughter, money or no money." My mother shot him a look. "You and your tests, John." I laughed. Typical dad. We spent the evening reminiscing, the warmth of my childhood home providing the comfort I so desperately needed. As night fell and I lay in my old room, I realized that while I had lost a partner in Daniel, I had regained something far more valuable, my self-worth and the unwavering love of my family. No amount of money could replace that. The weight of the recent events left an indelible mark on my soul, but it also gave me a newfound clarity. With renewed determination, I made my way back to Daniel's parents' home one last time, a suitcase in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. Daniel, caught off guard, looked at me. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" "Ending this charade," I replied calmly, handing him the divorce papers. His face went pale and he stammered, What is this?" "Exactly what it looks like. I'm done, Daniel." His mother, with a smug look on her face, chimed in, "Good riddance. We knew you'd come to your senses and leave our son. It's for the best." Suppressing the urge to snap back, I unfolded the newspaper, handing it over to them. The headline gleamed, "Local business tycoon's company makes remarkable comeback." Daniel's father took the newspaper, reading aloud, his voice quivering. After facing potential bankruptcy, the company managed to not only stay afloat, but has also seen unprecedented growth in the past few weeks. My gaze never wavered. "You were so eager to label me a freeloader. It turns out life has a funny way of showing us who truly is shallow." I left the house, with no intention of ever looking back. Over the next few days, my phone was inundated with calls from Daniel, messages full of regret, apologies, and pleas for a second chance. And just when I thought I had heard the last from them, postcards started arriving at my parents' home. Picturesque landscapes, with scribbled messages from his parents, each bearing the same desperate sentiment. "Forgive us." But their words meant nothing. The pain and humiliation they had put me through were still fresh in my mind. One evening, after yet another call from Daniel, I decided it was time to put an end to this. Answering the phone, I said, "Daniel, I've moved on. Your calls, your parents' postcards, they mean nothing. We had our time, and it's over." The line went silent for a moment before he whispered, "I'm sorry, Evelyn." But apologies weren't enough. I was done giving chances. It was time to rebuild and focus on myself, far away from the toxic web of deceit and conditional love. My phone buzzed with a message. It was from Jenny. "Hey, heard there's a new art gallery opening downtown. Want to check it out?" I quickly typed back, "Absolutely. Let's go this evening." The gallery was brimming with people. The art ranged from vibrant paintings to intricate sculptures, each piece telling a unique story. Jenny and I moved from one exhibit to the next, soaking in the creative atmosphere. At one particular painting, a depiction of a phoenix rising from the ashes, I felt an odd connection. It mirrored my own journey. Jenny, noticing my fixation, commented, "It's beautiful, isn't it? The idea of rebirth, rising from adversity." I nodded. "It's symbolic. Reminds me of, well, everything." Later, as we grabbed a bite at a nearby cafe, Jenny looked thoughtful. "You know, there's this workshop next week. It's about rediscovering oneself, finding one's passion. Want to give it a shot?" My initial hesitation was evident, but then I thought, why not? Sure, let's do it. Over the next few weeks, the workshop became a transformative experience. I dabbled in different activities, finding solace in painting. It became a therapeutic outlet for my emotions, each stroke reflecting my innermost feelings. One evening, after a particularly intense session, the workshop instructor approached me. "Your work, Evelyn, it's exceptional. Have you considered showcasing it?" The idea had never crossed my mind. "No, I haven't, but thank you." He smiled. "Think about it. Your art tells a story, and it deserves to be shared." Days turned into weeks, and soon, my small home studio was filled with paintings. The once unpacked boxes now contained art supplies. The transition was evident, from a woman scorned to an artist reborn. My father, ever the supportive figure, suggested organizing an exhibition. And with a little persuasion, I agreed. The opening night of the exhibition was a blur. Friends, family, and even strangers admired my work. The Phoenix painting, inspired by the gallery visit, was the star attraction. The evening concluded with a surprise. The workshop instructor approached, holding a check. "A buyer, Evelyn, for the Phoenix painting." Stunned, I stared at the figure. It wasn't about the money, but the validation. My journey, my pain, my rebirth, it had resonated with someone. As the days settled and the exhibition came to a close, I realized that life was full of unexpected twists. But with each downfall, there was an opportunity for a new beginning. My past with Daniel was just that, in the past. I had found my passion, my calling, and for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely happy. Life had come full circle. From pain to passion, from despair to hope, it was indeed a new beginning. And I was ready to embrace whatever came my way.